Welcome to Behind the Badge Conversations with CLEET, the podcast where we take you inside the world of law enforcement, one conversation at a time. I'm Derry Stacy, the director of CLEET, and I'm thrilled to be your host. Each quarter, we'll sit down with a distinguished leader in law enforcement to discuss their experiences, insights, and the challenges they face in today's ever-changing landscape. CLEET, or the Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training, is dedicated to enhancing the quality and professionalism of law enforcement across the state. Through training programs and ongoing education, we strive to ensure that our officers are equipped with the knowledge and skills they need to serve and protect our communities effectively. On Behind the Badge, we'll explore the critical issues impacting law enforcement today, from advancements in training and technology to the importance of community relationships and leadership development. Whether you're in the field, aspiring to join, or simply interested in the intricacies of law enforcement, this podcast is for you. So join us on this journey as we go behind the scenes and hear from the voices that shape the future of policing. Let's get started. Today, we're honored to have J.D. Younger, Chief of Edmond Police Department, as our first guest. With over 30 years of experience, Chief Younger has been instrumental in driving change and innovation in our field. We dive into their career, the lessons they've learned, and their vision for the future of law enforcement. Stay tuned, it's going to be an insightful conversation. J.D. Younger began his policing career on July 5, 1994, with the Norman Police Department as a beneficiary of the United States Department of Justice's Community-Oriented Policing Services Hiring Initiative. Since May 1, 2017, he has served as the Chief of Police for the City of Edmond, Oklahoma. During his career, J.D. performed numerous assignments, including Field Training Officer, Special Weapons and Tactics, SWAT, criminal investigations, and multiple operational and administrative supervisory positions. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Oklahoma and a master's degree from the University of Central Oklahoma. J.D. is also a graduate of multiple advanced law enforcement command and executive courses, including the FBI National Academy Session 225, PERF's Senior Management Institute for Police, Session 64, and the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Seminar, Session 78. J.D. currently serves as the president of the Oklahoma Association of Chiefs of Police and as a board member for the International Association of Police, Mid-Size Agency Division. J.D.'s community investment extends beyond his professional responsibilities. He previously served on the director for the multiple nonprofit organizations including Big Brothers Big Sisters, the United Way of Cleveland County. J.D. currently serves on the board of directors for the Victims Impact Panel of Oklahoma and Cycle 66. He is a member of Henderson Hills Baptist Church and the Rotary Club of Edmond. And now, let's welcome our guest, Chief J.D. Younger.
Thank you, sir.
What inspired you to begin a career in law enforcement and specifically in leadership in law enforcement?
Yeah, that's an interesting question to me. One, because I know many people in the field that from an early age knew it's what they wanted to do. They either had a family member that was in law enforcement, or they'd seen a movie or been involved in an event that really inspired them to pursue that career. But that's not my story. And so, my family are largely trade members. So my dad's an electrician, my mom's a cosmetologist. Their parents were mechanics and welders and trades workers. And so in my family, college really wasn't a traditional aspiration. But when I graduated high school, I was afforded an opportunity to pursue a formal education. And then my path kind of led me to a couple of different schools, and I ended up at Rose State College in a criminal justice program. And in taking the classes, I really had an interest in them. not because I had an idea that I would do that for a living, but just the subject matter interested me. The primary instructor at the time was a warden for Mabel Bassett Prison. And so he shared a lot of interesting stories about his experiences, and that kept me intrigued and interested. And so after I graduated from Rose State with an associate's degree, I was looking to transfer to the University of Oklahoma. And so when I had my first meeting with the counselor down there, trying to get advised on what classes to take, they said, well, here's the situation. You have a criminal justice associate's degree. We have a political science program for law enforcement administration. And if you'll transfer into that, all your credits will count, and you can just pick up right where you are. But if you pick any other field, you're probably going to lose about 20 hours, and you'll need to repeat several classes. And I said, law enforcement administration it is. And I liked the field anyway, but interesting that did play a part in my educational choice when I got there. But the real backstory is I had several friends at the time that were pursuing careers in law enforcement. And so while I didn't know it then, I can look back 30 years now and say, I really think that was just God exposing me to different opportunities to get interested in the field. He put people in my life that led me to look at that as an option. And then in 1994, when I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, the federal government at the time had a COPS hiring program, a community-oriented policing services hiring program, where they were hiring 100,000 cops nationwide. And so the city of Norman had applied and received a grant to hire 8 community-oriented policing officers.
You were one of them.
I was one of them. I was one of the 8. And so I really, I look back now and I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And not only just to be hired as a police officer, because I've really come to love the profession, but in that specific program, it really emphasized the importance of community relationships and understanding what your particular community was expecting from their law enforcement personnel. And so that's had a definite impact on every stage of my career since.
So in your opinion, what are the most important qualities for a law enforcement leader?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to give a list because you think, well, it's not exhaustive and it's hard to put an exhaustive list out there. But it makes me think when we're having a hiring process for a police officer here in Edmond, and I get a chance to talk to the applicants, and I'll ask them, well, what job do you think you're applying for? What do you think that means? What do you think that entails? And they go through a traditional list of tasks that may be in any kind of police officer job application. So I'm going to take reports. I'm going to arrest people. I'm going to work traffic collisions and those types of things. And I try to reaffirm to them, yeah, you absolutely are going to do those things, but that's not why you're getting hired. I tell them there's 3 things that we're hiring police officers for, and that's judgment, problem solving, and decision making. And that all those other actions are really just manifestations or outcomes of their judgment, problem solving, and decision making. And I think most, when they think about it, they see exactly what we're talking about. And even us having this conversation today, when you think about it, you're like, oh, no, I think that is why we hire police officers. And so it's not new, and it's not just my thoughts. I think it's when we take time to break down, what are we really wanting from you as a community, as a society? And you're like, yeah, I want you to have good judgment, good problem solving, good decision making, because we can apply that no matter what the situation is. I can't train you for every situation you're going to encounter because it's the world and it's full of humans, and humans do various things every day that surprise and shock and sometimes infuriate and sometimes please me, but I don't know that they're coming. And so I can't train you for all the possibilities, but I can reinforce good problem-solving, judgment, and decision-making.
Next question, it's a hot topic in law enforcement. So specifically here in Edmond, what strategies do you employ to really affect inclusion and diversity and to really make that a part of your hiring process and how you police here in Edmond?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you first off, I think that the English language is interesting to me, and especially in the world we live in today, where we use words where you and I may think they mean 2 different things. And so when we start talking about diversity and inclusion, I know those are hot button words for some people, I know for others, they're almost a sacrament, like, no, that's the gold standard. And what I will tell you is the way that I have framed those things, as a middle-aged white male, I love where I work. I feel really comfortable coming to work. I love the people I work with. And the way that I've chosen to define that is I want everyone to feel as comfortable as I do in this workplace. And so when we talk about strategies or tactics, I really, it's back to relational, orientation. Is I want people to have good relationships. Now I work with 200 people in my building, in my police department, and 1,000 people in my city. I fully accept that I'm not going to have 1,000 best friends. It's 1,000 humans. And so some that I'm going to get along with better than others. But what I hope is as we onboard people, we make it real clear that we're a service organization. And we exist for the service to others. And so one of our primary goals in preparing to meet that service is bonding around a common mission and not a common friendship. Yes, I hope we can be friendly. I hope you work with people that are good friends. I think this profession specifically would be very difficult to work in for years and years if you didn't have close friends that you could share in, confide in, lean on. All that being said, it's not a social club. It's a service club. And so we need to bind around that mission and those values. And now more to the diversity and inclusion specifically, it's those values that really should drive us. And so regardless of what your immutable characteristics are, regardless of your background, if we can come together around that core set of values, in our organization, while not exhaustive, but we hold up professionalism, accountability, respect, teamwork, integrity. Again, not an exhaustive list, but we think if we can say, hey, that's the core that we're all going to bind to, then that gives us a platform to have deeper discussions when someone's not in line with that. Not to go too deep, but, I'll never say there was a positive to the negative happenings in 2020 around our profession and the death of George Floyd. But what I will say is it opened up society and the profession in general to have some pretty hard conversations. And I'm not saying those conversations are fun, but I find them productive when someone's free enough to say, well, you do this and I don't like that. Whether it's internal or external, to be able to have those hard conversations in a constructive way, I really think have lent themselves to people that are interested in making the profession more inviting, more accepting to those that traditionally may have been marginalized or excluded from participation. And so I think that's the first thing is just the philosophical standpoint of let's have those conversations, let's understand different perspectives, and at the end of the day, let's understand that we are better if we're representative of the communities that we're serving, both in immutable characteristics, what I can see with my eye, but probably more importantly, what's in our hearts and what we think the community is asking us to do. I know that's a long-winded answer to that, but I think it's a complicated topic that deserves a more intentional and purposeful discussion than just saying, oh yeah, we want to make sure we have enough of this and enough of that. I think that's oversimplistic, and I don't think that necessarily leads to the kind of atmosphere we want as a community.
So Chief, tell me, how do you prioritize officer wellness and mental health within your department? Obviously, this is a difficult job, and as you've mentioned, we've gone through some difficult times lately, and then even for personally each individual officer, what they may experience. What do you do intentionally to address that within your department?
Well, thanks for the question. So first, a little bit of background. On July 19th, 2022, the Edmond Police Department suffered its first line of duty death, which to me is remarkable for an organization that's been around for over 100 years. for a city of 100,000 people to have your first line of duty death. It was tragic, unexpected, obviously. It exposed some things that we were doing, that we had started, that were going well, and some areas for improvement. So Sergeant C.J. Nelson was killed in a motorcycle crash by an impaired driver. 6 months prior to Sergeant Nelson's death, we had contracted as a department with a licensed professional counselor to help us with the implementation of a wellness program. So we had a peer support program for the better part of a decade, and had recently kind of reconfigured and rebranded that. And as part of that effort, we had contracted with this licensed professional counselor. And so she had 6 months to kind of build relationships. So when that incident happened, it became just glaringly apparent how important that service and access to those services were for our department. And I suspect for the other 750,000 law enforcement officers in this country. But it was really a godsend to have her in place and involved. And so over the next year, following the July 19, 2022 death of Sergeant Nelson, basically we had a full-time licensed professional counselor. And that was so impactful to us that we requested and were appropriated a position for our police department from the city council for a full-time licensed professional counselor as a paid member of the City of Edmond workforce.
Awesome.
And so we were fortunate enough to get that position hired full-time in July of 2023. And so we have a licensed professional counselor on staff.
All right, time for a little bit of fun now. So what has been the most unusual or unexpected event that has occurred in your time in law enforcement?
You know, one, I think we're typically the victim of recency bias. So you think of whatever just most recently has popped up. But I will tell you, when I get the question about unusual things or exciting things or most memorable things, I immediately go back to my first couple of years on as a police officer, working night shift in Norman, Oklahoma, around a college campus. At the time, the police department also housed the ambulance service. And so it wasn't uncommon for police officers to go on medical calls with an ambulance service. And so one night, we get a medical call. It's in an area that has an apartment complex, but then a lot of duplexes. And so the addressing system, if you're not real familiar with it, could be a little weird. But I know where this is at, and I get there, and I knock on the door, and I'm greeted by a young male in his early 20s, who's obviously by appearance in shock, big eyes, pale, looking at him, and he's like, "In here." And so I follow him into this duplex, and we walk up these stairs, and much to my surprise, to find a young female laying on a bathroom floor in labor.
Oh my.
And so I'm thinking, well, that's okay. The ambulance is on the way, so I can just give them comfort. I'm here with them, and we'll wait for this ambulance to show up. And so I walk around the bathroom to get to the doorway, and when I get to the doorway, I can immediately see that this baby's head is crowning. And so I know we're not waiting on an ambulance, we're having a baby. And so, get down on my knees, and we get towels and everything like that, and we're coaching her through pushing this baby out, and she delivers a baby. And so we're tying off the umbilical cord, and we're getting this baby to breathe, and we do. And about that time, the ambulance does show up and come in there, and so I hand this baby off to the paramedics that showed up, and almost immediately leave, because I was done. They didn't need the police anymore. And at the time, it was impactful, but not too much, because I went right back out and got another call, and then off onto our duties we went. But as the years have gone past, of course, you can imagine following that, I got some notices from the hospital with information about the baby, and I think about her 1 year birthday, I got a picture of her from the family with a little note. I always thought it was interesting. They named the baby Miranda, and
So you warned me.
so I warned them about that. But that's that's 28 years ago now, and I remember like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And so, like I said, I don't know if it's law enforcement or police related, but it was there in my police profession, and like I said, I get more appreciation for it as the years pass. But to be there to help bring life into the world with a woman that was her first child, so everything that goes with that, with a father, his first child, and everything that goes with that. But just to be able to be a part of that experience for him, hopefully a positive one, is probably the one that's most impactful to me.
Okay, if you could switch jobs for a day with any fictional law enforcement, detective, or police officer for a day, who would it be and why?
Well, I'm gonna show my generational difference here, but almost immediately I think about Andy Griffith or Mayberry, and maybe not for the reasons that most might think. For those that are younger than 40, hopefully they know that Andy, that he was a law enforcement officer 70 years ago. And you hear the term about Mayberry, like everything's perfect, and that's why you want to go back there. And I would say, for those that think that, go back and watch a couple of those episodes, because everything wasn't perfect. They had single fathers, they had intoxicated people, they had bank robbers, they dealt with racism, they dealt with all the things that we deal with today. I just think it was done in a subtle way that maybe it doesn't come right to the eye. But again, why I would switch roles with him is, again, this is fictional. You rarely saw Andy wearing a gun, and I think that was intentional to show you that we rarely need a gun to do what police officers do. Now we have to have it as a contingency. It's an important tool, but it's a tool that's maybe used in 0.0004% of incidents we're involved in. That the biggest tool, back to that judgment, problem solving, decision making, it's our minds, it's our ability to communicate.
Relationships, as you mentioned earlier.
Relationships. It's a show about relationships.
Right.
Totally. Relationships with your parents, relationships with your children, relationships with peers. It's all about relationships, and that they're rarely perfect, and how you work through those, and how you are committed to common goals, our standards as a community. And when there's conflict, how you work through that. And I just think that series is just a great example of how humans can work through challenges. And he's the great character that is constantly showing that, the compassion for others. He shows his own faults at times, but he doesn't lose value because of it. I think so frequently now in today's society, and I'm just as guilty as anybody, you make a mistake, or you say something you shouldn't, or make a bad decision, then I'm branding you for life that you're a this or you're a that. When we all realize, no, we make mistakes every day. And mistakes of the mind aren't near as bad as mistakes of the heart. And even mistakes of the heart, sometimes we're just wrong. And to show people some grace, to show me some grace, and to let me learn from it. And I've been so blessed by people in my life that have done that to me. And so in that show, I see him doing that for others. And so I'm like, man, I'd like to be that.
So growing up, and I think you grew up in Del City, and, as a young child, and even as an adult, what was your favorite cop show or cop movie? And do you think that it accurately reflects or reflected law enforcement today?
Again, not to get too philosophical, but I think there's some thread of truth in a lot of cop shows from my childhood, which would have been the 70s. Even up to today, there's themes of truth in there. So, again, for people over 40, you know what Barney Miller is. Others may not, but it's set in a big city with a variety of people, both racially and gender and experience-wise. And again, it's about relationships. It's really about relationships. Now, it's set in terms of someone committed a crime or someone didn't commit a crime, but it's really all about how they work together and get through things. But when you talk about just me particularly and things that stick out in my mind, so in the late 80s, there was a TV series called Miami Vice with Crockett and Tubbs, and it was about undercover narcotics investigators and chasing cocaine shipments and all that type of stuff, and I thought that was the best.
Cool.
No, Sonny Crockett had this long flowing hair, and so I thought, well, I need to grow hair out like that, and that was about the time I was getting interested in law enforcement, and so I had these ideas about, yeah, that's what I'll be, an undercover detective, having no idea that's not how it works. You know, there's a series of steps you go through in the profession to even qualify to do something like that. But at the time, as an 18-year-old kid, I thought, I got it figured out now.
All right, last question.
Okay.
Can you share a moment that really reaffirmed your belief in law enforcement and what you do every day?
Recency bias gets in your brain because it's like, what do I remember happened last? So, for example, 2 months ago, we had a 4-year-old and 6-year-old set of sisters drown in a pool here locally, and the call came out drowning. So our officers respond with fire. Officers were first on scene, fire not too far behind, and so no pulse on these 2 young ladies. They get them out, all 3, ambulance discipline, fire discipline, police discipline. They work them to the fullest of their extent. 2 hours into this, they're already at the hospital at this time, they get a pulse back on one, and then the next one. Fast forward 6 weeks, those girls are released from the hospital with no neurological damage.
Oh my word.
To go back home with their families. They're just visiting here from out of state. Well, that's a miracle first and foremost. That's not going to happen in 1 out of 1,000,000 cases, but in this case it did. You say, well, what does that have to do with policing? Well, it has to do with public service, and it has to do with, yes, that's a medical call, but officers go on those things, and there was a super positive outcome. Again, doesn't always happen. I think I get to see things like that frequently. They're not going to make the news. You're not going to see them on X or Twitter. You may see them on Facebook if the department, if we feel like we can share certain information without violating someone's privacy rights. But I literally get to see that stuff week in and week out. Just officers, public servants in general, just serving others, largely under a veil of anonymity. You don't know who they are. They got a call. They went there. I'm the beneficiary of emails from citizens that say, hey, I ran into this officer. I don't know their name, but I just wanted you to know how well they treated me. It's not uncommon for them to say, I'm sure you get a lot of complaints, so I just wanted to give you a compliment. Well, the reality is, while we do get some complaints, our compliments probably outweigh complaints 5 to 1. And it's that not everybody gets to see. You know, the officer on the street, he's not getting to see all those emails that I get every day. He's not getting to go to a Rotary Club or to a ribbon cutting and having people I don't even know see my patch and giving me the credit for the work that they do day in and day out. When I go into a restaurant in my town in a uniform and people are like trying to fight to get to the register to pay for my meal, well, that's not because they think I'm the best person of all time. That's because someone I work with that wears the same uniform that I do has served them in a way that made such an impression on them that they want to show that appreciation. And I get to benefit from that. I get to see that, or maybe the officer on night shift that was at their house at 4 o'clock in the morning taking care of a problem, they may never get to see that. Right. And so, I point out that one instance, I would just say I get to see weekly stuff that just reaffirms my belief in not only people I work with, but in my community, that no, it really does work. If you're intentional, if you're committed to relationships, if you're willing to have conversations, if we understand there's 2 sides to the equation, that the community has to engage and share expectations, and your public servants have to understand those expectations and then follow through and meet them. If you got both sides working, man, it's a pretty good system.
That is awesome. Well, I sure appreciate your time. I know how busy it is and how busy your schedule is. So thank you for taking time out to share not only some of your heart and your experiences, but some of your insight with us as well. And I hope that it can be beneficial to others as they hear it, and kind of just give people a general sense of what we do day to day and why it's important. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you and your leadership here in Edmond and what you do. And I wish you the best of luck.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.